I don't understand how the Mask of Zorro is not being talked about enough these days. Like everywhere I go on the internet, I don't really see much people talking about the Mask of Zorro. Whereas for me, the Mask of Zorro is very special to me. It's it's a movie that's been part of my childhood, and I love it to death. And I consider it, at least in my opinion, one of the best films of all time. Whereas for most people, they're like, oh yeah, it was probably it's a good movie from the '90s, and not a lot of people talk about it. But to me, it has a very special place in my heart, and I really grew up with this movie pretty much. And a little backstory, but I did not actually watch this movie first. I actually watched The Legend of Zorro first, so the sequel itself. And it was like, like it was. As a kid, it was definitely really fun and entertaining. There was lots of drama, especially with the whole relationship aspect and the divorce and him, Elena being with like the other guy or something, and then, and it was just super like comedic too with the tone, and like that whole chaotic mess made the film really entertaining as a kid, and it still is entertaining today. But once I was like kind of just walking around the video store with my parents, and I saw the Mask of Zorro, and just finding out that there was another movie, like there was a about with the same actor Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and like, oh, there's another movie of this, and it's not even the sequel. It's like the film, the original film, the one that happens before the Legend of Zorro. So I was like, oh man, this is gonna be interesting. Like like I want to rent this, and then so we rented it, and I feel so nostalgic about this actually. But I remember the exact day of how it felt like. I remember it was a sunny day. It was one of those days when I was off from school in primary school, and my mother had to like stay home and take care of me and stuff, and she took me to the video store, and we rented the Mask of Zorro, and yeah, it was on DVD, and I just popped that into the DVD player in the living room, and with the sunny day in the background, and oh man, that was such. I don't know, I was like so blown away by this film actually, and it was just funny because I often did this with so many movies where I saw the sequel first over the original film before the original film. So same thing happened with Jurassic Park. So I saw Jurassic Park 3 before the first movie, and another one was watching my first Bond movie was Die Another Day. The first Pierce Brosnan movie, but the first Pierce Brosnan Bond movie was GoldenEye, and so the same thing here. And here I have it. I have it on VHS. I did not grow up with the VHS, so I just kind of found this at a thrift store, and I think this is a really cool thing to collect. This is the DVD that I grew up with. So after some time after I rented it, I was asking my parents, hey, I want to own this because I love this movie so much. And so here it is. I have the DVD, and many years later, as an adult, I ended up buying the 4K steelbook because damn, this looks freaking amazing. Check this out. Yep. And here's the back. I really love the back too. I think what's so special about the Mask of Zorro is it has that timeless adventure film, with that '90s feel, and it also took itself seriously. Yes, there were some comedic bits, and there are some really quotable lines that are hilarious, but also it took its story seriously compared to the second movie, where it didn't. I don't feel like it took itself too seriously in the second movie, whereas the first movie, I feel like it really was serious, and it already set the tone at the beginning when like one of Montero's guards kills Diego's wife, and then Montero takes Diego's daughter Elena and raises her as his own daughter. And I remember as a kid thinking, yo, this is so evil, this is cruel, and he's sending Diego to jail and for 20 years, and I was just like, holy shit, this is just cruel and evil. And he comes back years later, and Elena still thinks that Montero is her actual dad. I'm like, dude, this is so this is so bad, man. And as wild as that scenario sounds, it still sets up the stakes, and you're taking the story seriously. You're not treating it as a joke, and you see the consequences and the repercussions of all these actions, and that carries out through the entire movie. And another thing this movie did brilliantly is how they kind of defied our expectations. So you think that with the intro, the opening sequence, that Anthony Hopkins as Diego is going to be like the main character, and that he's going to be Zorro for the rest of the movie. Well, if you haven't watched any of the trailers, I think the trailers do show that Antonio Banderas does become Zorro later on. But I think that's just such a cool dynamic too. The fact that you have like there's an original Zorro, training a new Zorro, and it's not even his son or anything. It's just this kid that he met like back when he was Zorro, like back in his days, and Antonio Banderas, Alejandro, all grown up, and then Diego trains him, and I don't know. It's just such a cool story dynamic. I love that storytelling, that kind of storytelling. I guess I've always gravitated towards like mentor student type stories, or like training montages kind of films. So many films do this. You have the Karate Kid. There's like a training montage in Top Gun Maverick. I X-Men First Class. There's also a training montage. I like stories like this. I don't know why. I mean, I don't really have a conclusion on this. I'm just theorizing about this. But one thing I think why the Mask of Zorro isn't being talked about as much. I think it sits in a weird place where there's so many classic adventure films like Indiana Jones that are still talked about today and still iconic and everything. And then you have like what happened after the Mask of Zorro, which was like fantasy films, like with swords and battles and things like that. Whereas the Mask of Zorro kind of is in between all that, and it has that Indiana Jones feeling, that adventure type of spirit, and classic 90s film type of storytelling, but also it still contains something that may be outdated for some people. The typical like fencing type of sword fighting, and I always like the sword fighting in the Mask of Zorro, but it might not be something that people gravitate towards today. Maybe like people are more gravitating towards fantasy type of sword fighting, like battles like Game of Thrones and things like that. I mean, I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing. Maybe that's the reason why the Mask of Zorro isn't being talked as much. It's like this, it's this forgotten film from 1998 where not a lot of people really talk about, and it's just and by the time like the Legend of Zorro came out, they you can tell they were trying to move away from that classic old school storytelling and try to put in more like jokes and drama and integrated into the story, to make it more accessible, I guess, to Hollywood in a way. I don't know. And I'm just going to say it right here, but this is one of the best scores ever in film history. James Horner composed a beautiful score. It is timeless. It is beautiful. I love it to death. And Martin Campbell is the director of this. And the fact that Martin Campbell directed 3 of my childhood films, and that includes GoldenEye, The Mask of Zorro, and Casino Royale, is insane, because oh my god, seriously. And I'm surprised to see that The Mask of Zorro has like 6.8 or something on IMDb, and I'm like, what? And it's so the opposite for me. Like, this movie is literally a 10 for me. And maybe nostalgia has something to do with it. Obviously, I have a special connection with this movie. I grew up with this. I remember renting this movie at the video store. So like, yeah, I mean, I have that personal connection, but at the same time, I think it's also just a great film, and I think it should rank as equal as things like Indiana Jones and The Lord of the Rings, Jurassic Park. I think it belongs in the same category, but a lot of people will probably be like, oh, well, it was a good movie, but it's not like remembered as much as, the iconic films like The Matrix, Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, but I say it's in the same category as those films. But yeah, what did you guys think of this video? Let me know in the comments, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.